Welcome to the Thunderdome.
Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of Get Tailored, Form Fit Yourself to Your Soul. My name is Heather Taylor and I'm so excited because this week we're going to do a throwback. We're going all the way back to 2023 to the first episode of Get Tailored, which was in members only access. And today it is accessible to everyone. I'm so excited because our co-host is Reuben Langdon and our guest is Kerry Jehanne-Guadalupe, who wrote the book Devil's Yoga. She really talks about her experience and what this book created for her and how it's taught a lot about discernment. And it also talks about karmic entanglement. And I think this is something that we really need to take a look at in our daily lives and find out, are we in alignment with the relationships and the type of relationships we're creating? And what do we need to do to improve them, let them go, move on? And maybe it's simply the relationship with ourselves. Are we in karmic entanglement with ourselves? Take a look, see how you feel. Leave your posts and comments below. We want to hear your stories. We want to be a part of your community in life, and we want you to be a part of ours. So go to gettailored.love, reach out, send us a message, post in one of the media comments. I will see you next week live, and welcome to the Thunderdome. My name is Heather Taylor, and you are on Get Tailored, Form Fit Yourself to Your Soul. And this show is really about conscious awareness and meeting people in our communities that are practicing this in their daily life. It's very diverse, from book writers, songwriters, musicians, agriculturalists, people in the ET community, spiritual community, non-spiritual community. It's really about how important it is that we're all doing these separate, beautiful things. Just like, when you go to college, some are doctors, some are lawyers, some are massage therapists, but we're all kind of working together and it all fits. And that was an important thing that I realized in my life, that I needed to see the diversities that were impacting me and how it was impacting others. So today I'd like to introduce Reuben Langdon. Yeah, the crowd goes well.
All right.
Who has a show that you can see on Vimeo and or via TV. It's in the 3rd season, and that's called Interview with Ed, Extraterrestrials.
Extra Dimensionals.
Dimensionals.
That was the original title, actually.
Freudian.
No, that was the original title was Extraterrestrials. And then when I was interviewing Wendy Kennedy and the Palladians, they sort of suggested, you might want to go with the term dimensionals. That's more of an accurate concept of who we are. I was like, oh, okay, I like that. All right.
Yeah. Would you like to share a little bit about your membership and what you're doing? And
yeah, I just launched today my podcast, which is actually old versions of the membership. So I have a membership portal that I was just sharing with Kerry. It's been a year going strong now. We have new guests every week. And as soon as we release Heather's episode, her actual show episode, which we did the physical show, then we'll have her on to talk about her journey and everything. But yeah, so I do in the membership portal, we have actually I call it Interview with Ed 2.0, where we have sort of a live interaction. So whoever's a member can then ask questions.
And we also have today with us, which is Kerry, and I do not want to butcher your last name, but
Jehanne-Guadalupe. It's a
Jehanne.
Yes.
It's beautiful, though. It's a very beautiful name. And she is just as amazing as Reuben. She has a book out called The Devil's Yoga. So I'm going to let her explain. And she also has a album out right now called Illumination, which you can see on YouTube and Spotify. So welcome, Kerry. Would you like to share a little bit about you and what you're doing?
Sure. I function as a channel of light language. Do you want to speak just like a minute about light language or?
Sure.
Sure. So light language, it's a multidimensional language that's medicinal in nature. And so it's a channeled language that can be utilized as an energy healing modality. As an energy practitioner, I work mostly with light language, and it's a blast. It's our higher self will work as a bridge between the channeled language and our physical, mental, and emotional levels of our being. And so I channel light language, and then I track how someone's higher self is clearing out past traumas, limiting beliefs, patterns that we want to get rid of, move fast, and anchor into our next level of well-being, whether that's feeling more joy or healthier boundaries, speaking our truth, whatever it might be. And so that's what I do on a daily basis. And then this is also a big passion of mine, is to speak about my experience. It's a vulnerable experience, but so worth sharing, about a really horrible time at a retreat center. Because I do feel like it's not about, it's, all dark, but I think there's a shadow that is coming to light more and more in spiritual communities, retreat centers, whatever it is. And I think to talk about that shadow is so helpful. It's helpful to prevent people from getting hurt. And then also on the other end, if someone has that, they know they're not alone, and there's a lot of hope in recovery, because it can be quite gnarly. So it's a passion of mine to speak about the shadow that is coming to light, and what that can look like, and how we can illuminate it. Yeah.
Right. Or illuminate it. It's not that way. Illuminating it is key.
Yeah.
And I know when she's on with Reuben, sometime in August, September, that she'll be talking much deeper about her work and her experience, and giving that deeper layer of insight. So that's perfect intro to what today's show is about. Today's show is about discernment, and I am Heather Taylor, and you're with the show Get Tailored. Every week is going to be different. Some weeks we're going to have interactive live Get Tailoring. There's people already signed up for certain weeks to come on and share their experiences and be raw and vulnerable with everybody else on the show, which I think is powerful within itself. Today, however, is about discernment. And a lot of the things I talk about is the 5 elements and what those 5 elements are, which is mental activation, which is fire. It's that fire element. When you come into that awareness, you're like, oh my freaking gosh, how did I not see that? How is that not present in my life? How was I not aware that that was happening around me? And I was so stuck into these spaces. And once that awareness comes, then it's like unfolding the discernment of that aspect. And so one of the things that I was talking with Kerry and Reuben this week about was that same thing, how we're going into so many places and spaces that are causing an awareness or an illumination into places where I wasn't even aware that I wasn't discerning. And it wasn't because I wasn't in the awareness of discernment. It was because I wasn't aware within my own self that I wasn't valuing that part of me. Like I would silence how I felt about something because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or I didn't want to impede on the flow that was happening. And then I didn't share, which caused me to not fully be myself. And I'm sure a lot of people can understand that. Or I'm communicating with, I feel like I'm really moving through this and much better at this. But for a long, long time, I would even not say fully my truth, or I would, for lack of a better word, dumb down what I was actually trying to communicate out of fear of the person's response. And we talk a lot about that. Are we being selfless, selfish, or self? And discernment is a big part of that. And what's the difference? So I'd love to hear your guys' feedback and experience.
Shall I go? Shall I go?
Reuben?
My dad. Okay. So I talked to my dad and talked to him a while today, and he is talk about discernment and talking about having a lack of discernment. It's so frustrating. Without going into too much detail, basically he bought this car for this woman, and, she was taking advantage of him, from the get-go. He didn't really see it. Anyways, they had a fallout, but he's been paying for her car for almost a year. And I know most people would be like, that's stupid. Why would you do that? But I talked to him today and I'm like, what are you doing? Why every day I talk to him, I'm like, are you still paying for the car? Yeah. Okay. So but the core of it, and I could feel this, I could hear it in his voice. He doesn't want her to suffer as much suffering as she's caused on him. he still has a big heart and he's afraid, how's she going to get to work, or how's, is she going to make a fuss, and is she going to yell at him, and just to keep the peace. He's basically paying the car to keep the peace. And I'm like, what kind of insanity is that? But it goes to show how many of us out there are sort of doing, spending money or losing our livelihood just to keep the peace, and not speaking our truth. So that, my dad is a prime example of that. It's probably the upper echelon of ridiculousness of people wouldn't go to that extreme, but there are many out there who are doing that. So, I tried to be as nice as I could, but I said, basically, Dad, she's got you by the balls, and you need to you need to stop. This is insanity, yeah. It's just sad to watch someone give their power away like that, in a situation that clearly from the get-go, I was aware of the situation from the beginning, and I knew from the beginning that was her motives. And he's afraid of. So the flip side is he hasn't reported the car or stopped paying because he's afraid his credit's going to go bad. And I said, the credit card companies have you by the balls too, Dad. So it goes both ways. So you need to grow a pair of cojones and decide which, stop paying, forget about your credit, because that stuff doesn't matter anymore. We're moving where we're moving into. Credit score is the least of your worries. So, get the car repoed, stop paying the madness, and let's move on. But yeah, it's just a lot of people are in those situations. So I just kind of brought it up because I know my dad is probably just an example of many people in those situations.
I definitely understand that. It's interesting. A lot of times I'll hear, well, I don't want to cause them pain. And it's like,
right.
Hold on. Are you causing them pain, or are they actually choosing that experience and you're blocking their ability to learn it because they're so busy trying to not hurt anybody's feelings, when, guys, we're supposed to feel all the feelings. That's the biggest thing. I was just talking to my oldest daughter last night, and my second daughter blocked the keys in my oldest daughter's car, and she didn't want to wait the next day. It's a AAA, so she decided, it's a convertible Mustang, and she decided to cut a piece of the soft top to try and get in the car. And she didn't talk to her sister about it. She didn't talk to Ben or Ryan about it. And she came to me, and I was like, Callie, where were you emotionally? And she was like, I was in selfishness and reaction. I just wanted to get where I was going. I didn't want to have to reschedule. And I just wanted to get in the car and go. And I said, so did you think about how your actions are impacting the people around you? And she was like, they did not. And I think that happens a lot, is that, and my oldest daughter was like, oh my gosh, it's her dream convertible Mustang. She has a Mustang horse. She worked very, very hard to obtain both those things. And then it was like, okay, Cass, how do you want to approach this? And I think that's the biggest thing, is that we want our family and friends in our community to love each other and love us. But then we get so upset. And if we don't recognize the trigger, so the first thing I asked her was, okay, so she was so upset. I said, Cassidy, what is it in you that's attracting this reality? And she was like, what do you mean? You mean that I attracted my sister to cut the hole in the car? And I said, well, your sister was just an energy, a frequency that was holding that lesson. It could have come in any direction, but there's something inside of you that you're trying to learn. Spirit's trying to teach you right now. And she was sitting on it. And I was like, okay, let's look at everything that's happening in your life. What does Spirit keep saying? And Spirit kept saying, everything she was facing in her life was the same, different things, same core. And it was, slow down, be where you are, enjoy the moment. Stop trying to rush to the next step. I see that a lot. where people are like, okay, I attain this, now I got to get to the next goal. And it's about the journey, not the sprint, and I think that happens a lot too. And I'm super excited to hear what you have to say, Kerry, because we were talking about this week.
Yeah. Well, I can say that the lack of discernment on my end was a really big part of how I got so entrapped. So right from the start, I wasn't even discerning the center. I somewhat trusted the man that referred me there, the glowing reviews. I didn't do any homework on my own. I just basically handed over all discernment to reviews, to, famous people. Because even if you think about someone like John of God, Oprah backed him, right? Oh, if Oprah likes him, everything should be fine. I basically went in with no discernment at all. And then after I started to get entangled with this shaman, and just to put it in a nutshell so people have a sense of the situation, I experienced such sexual predation from a man disguised as a shaman, but not through the typical grooming techniques of emotional grooming, but through energetic manipulation while under the influence of plant medicine. So that was the nightmare in short. So even when I was there, because it's a small community and people chat, I was learning things about him. And I still wasn't discerning. I was learning he was addicted to sex, cheating on his girlfriend, addicted to pornography. And I was in this, but we all have our human journey. We all have our struggles. Who am I to judge? Mm-hmm. There's a difference between judging and discerning, and I wasn't doing either. And so I can really see how much I handed over my power, my knowing, my discernment. That was such a big part of me getting entangled with him, was not showing up in my knowing, not discerning, and just literally handing it over. And that was a big part of why I got hooked.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the big questions come into is like, okay, I understand I need to be discerning, but how do I discern? What are the tools that I use, and are the tools for me the same for everybody else? And I guess for me, in my observation, the answer would be the tool is the same, but how it's used is dependent upon what it is that person is facing. Right? So for example, if, someone is constantly in these relationships, which I present, and then each relationship that I would go through, the next one was a little better. And so I would, instead of recognizing that I was growing and healing, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm attracting this healthier person. It's all beautiful. It's all going to be okay. But I was still clinging to that. He's going to change. I'm changing. It's going to go, instead of just owning my space and recognizing that I needed to work on all the parts of myself so that I could see and discern better. There's also a pattern in people. People would come in and I'd want to help them all the time and show up. And that's where I was talking earlier about sacrificing myself, like your dad, Reuben, to be there without asking for any return. Because I'm a giver. That's my heart. That's what I love to do. And then at the end of the day, whatever that result was, that person was on a totally different journey and mission and wasn't into that space. And it would end up being, I'm holding the whole ship, and when I looked at that, whose responsibility was that? Absolutely mine.
Yeah.
Because of my inability to be aware of how to discern. So what are some tips you guys could give our audience today to look at what they can do to help see what they're not discerning, maybe uncover a blind spot, and to gain a discernment in a way that isn't pulling the rug out from under their life, but allowing them to see a little bit more of themselves? Kerry?
One of the things that has helped me in my journey is this book called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. Hands down, the best book for me. Read it 6 times and I can't reread things. So if I read it 6 times, it was doing something for me. One of the things he talked about was the definition of love and how we can form a definition of love within the first 7 years of our life. So if we're growing up in a household where there's some kind of physical abuse, we might associate that with love. We get older, we get into relationships, and there's some kind of physical abuse, but it's entangled with love. And so for me, in terms of discerning and really in terms of relationships, I really can look back and be like, what were these old definitions? And am I operating from those definitions? Am I discerning from my heart in this present moment, from my knowing, or am I operating from a program? Because those definitions of love are not just about romantic relationships, but even how we're relating to friends, to family, coworkers, what's our norm? And I think that to really look into those programs, to really kind of discerning what part of me is operating right now. Is it the old program that's operating? Am I operating from my truth? But just simply knowing that we can have old, outdated belief systems that can be running the show that really prevent us from discerning what's in our highest good. We can be just in our norm, what's been normalized in our life, and not necessarily discerning from a place, from a higher place or a higher awareness in us, but just we can be programmed. We're human beings. We can all sorts of programs, right? All sorts of conditions, all sorts of belief systems, and to really kind of question that. So for me, just asking, where am I operating from? Am I operating from an ego that's out of alignment? Am I operating from a past trauma, from a reaction? So even just what's operating my system right now? Is it my truth? Is it love? Is it fear? So just tuning into myself and being open to answering that really, really honestly. Oh, I'm totally operating from fear right now, So that's also been really, really helpful. And then in terms of spiritual communities or working with shamans or gurus or something, what has been really helpful to me is to look for the consciousness of separation. And it appears everywhere. So even if someone's talking about the divine feminine rising, but they're talking about it as a way to bash men, that's a red flag. Or very much the I'm awake versus asleep. And because they're forming a connection through a sense of separation. And so that's been, it can also happen with, and people can honestly feel like they're spiritual and not religious in a very beautiful, holistic way. But we can also use that as a way to separate. We're past that low level of consciousness. We're here, right? But then there's this quick side tangent. There's all sorts of funky things in spiritual, including cult. Don't need to open that door, but it's how it's used, And so if they're using it in a way to promote separation, that's also been more of a red flag for me, and a kind of a way for me to discern who am I working with, what consciousness are they working with, where are they coming from, and is it really about unity or is it about separation? And also you can think about, I've had not too many people, but enough people say, they just come into my space and like, oh, Kerry, my guide is telling me to tell you this. And they don't ask me if I want what their guide has to say. But if I do say yes, what I've realized is that they don't follow up with, is this true for you? Does this resonate with you? Because what happens, it's not just a power positioning that they have my truth and I'm not aware of it, but they're not checking in to see if it's in resonance with me. So there's a separation. It's almost like if I really bought into that, I'd be separating from my knowing, from my personal power and handing that over to somebody else. And so it can sneak in all sorts of ways. I think also like a separation from true healing. Oh, there's no such thing as a victim, right? So there is on the higher planes, absolutely, I get that. But on this third dimension, we can have an experience of being victimized. And what do we do with that? So important. Do we not process it and just be, everything happens to me and live in victim consciousness? Or do we spiritually bypass it? But even with that, it's a separation from truth, from really doing our deep work, from going to the anger, to the fear, to the grief, and then through that into compassion, where we're really then connected to ourselves by going through the through the trauma. So I think there's so many ways that level of consciousness, that separation consciousness can sneak in, and just trying to be more discerning about that. Didn't mean to be too long-winded, I guess.
No, I think it was really perfect and it covered a lot of spaces, because one of the biggest things that, I was kind of like, okay, what is the first show going to be about? Because, really interacting with the group is like a big part of what I do. You know, when I'm in public or teaching retreats or whatever is that I'm doing, you know, I love that part. And a lot of the things that I was getting feedback on is, you know, Heather, how do I discern when I'm stepping into this spiritual awakening? People are bringing all this information forth. I'm from Western medicine. And when I'm working with the surgeons, it's like they are bridging something. And there's a lot of seeking going on instead of reaching. And I think when that dichotomy happens, when that separation happens, you know, it doesn't mean that these people that are crossing boundaries or not asking permission or really have an agenda instead of just being there to be present and really being aware of the people that they're impacting because they want to be seen. I want to be seen. I want to be seen. I'm enough. I'm enough. And that's what they're facing in themselves. Have a lot of compassion for that and get it. You know, the thing is, though, is that we have a lot of people that are coming into the understanding that all the aspects are connected and that they all need to come in each person's own individual way. So a lot of people are trying to discern, oh my gosh, there's so much out there. How do I know what is really in alignment with who I am when I'm trying to figure out who I am? And so when you're grabbing all those spaces and talking about it, Kerry, it's like you're check. You're going through the cycles of what's happening to a lot of people. And that's really what inspired me to even do the show. And Reuben knows he was actually the day I decided to do this with this months ago. I was like, you know, Ben was like, all right, my tech guy, you know, let me build and create. And I was the slow turtle. I really pulled back and took my time because I wanted to, first of all, I've been in the closet for over 20 years. So coming out into the world in this way was really a huge step for me personally. I had to check in with myself. Do I have an agenda? Do I have a goal? What's the goal? What's the difference between agenda and goal? And where am I at in my own journey? Because my goal is to really be in service of that awareness. I feel that if we can support and assist and give as much information as possible to all the people coming out, that they can go and have more of a direct path than having the experiences that all three of us have had without having someone saying, hey, is that person willing to wash your feet or do they just want you to wash their feet? Like, where's the balance here? And so I want to thank you. That's really super important. And I think it's missed a lot. Reuben, what do you have to?
Well, Kerry definitely, she definitely covered a lot there. I don't know if there's much to follow up other than I'm curious because, like your daughter, you know, who had this happen to her, so to say, I'm curious to why is my dad, you know, I know why my dad is in my life and why he's constantly reflecting back these lessons. But I guess that's where I would go with the question to you is, you know, I've had this since high school. I've been in this position where the father-son role has been reversed, where I'm the one constantly like, what are you doing? And it's been my whole life. So I wonder what aspects of myself are inviting that in, so to say. It's a little bit
Well, I guess
different.
take a deeper look at that. You know, if I may share a little bit of what I know about your eclectic childhood.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Sure, please.
So, you know, with the things that your mom went through, you know, with the community that she was with and that whole experience, which brought in so much awareness to you. You know, you were the kid and you want to share a little bit about
My mom was in a cult,
that.
by the way. Yeah, my mom was in a cult.
You was a kid. And what happened when you went?
When I went to the cult gatherings?
I don't know if you remember the story. Your mom told me the story. So
Did she tell you?
She did. She did.
Yeah. Well, her version is a little bit different than mine, obviously. So yeah, I guess we don't have to name names per se, but it was as cults go, it was a pretty lax cult. It wasn't like they weren't like sacrificing kids and drinking blood and that kind of, you know, craziness.
Just mind altering it.
Yeah, there's mind altering, as most cults and religions. My dad is part of the other cult, the religious cult called Christianity. And again, not all of Christianity is a cult, but much of it is. Most of these institutions, Catholic Church and others are, and that's part of his need to put others before him, is this guilt that's pushed on by that version of the cult. The religious cults are constantly telling us that we need to put others before ourselves, and that is in order for us to feel guilty to subscribe to the cult, to stay indoctrinated. The other side of the spectrum, where my mom was growing up, she was in it was a channeler, and the channeler was, using this idea of, mystic powers and seeing into the future to sort of indoctrinate fear into everybody, saying that, the end of the world is coming and that we need to prepare. And that's a common theme with religions and cults. So my mom was drinking that Kool-Aid, and I was, as a young kid, was not into it. I was like, this is all BS. Let's just do what we want to do and not like live in the middle of nowhere and build a bomb shelter. And I can see the fun in that these days, now that I'm older, I'm like, oh yeah, building a bomb shelter to get away from society. That's kind of cool. It's actually a fun thing to do, maybe.
I want a vacation.
Right, exactly. But the intentions behind it were very manipulative and controlling. And, my mom racked up her credit cards because she thought the end of the world was happening. And there was a lack of responsibility, one, as a mother, and two, just to herself financially, so I had two parents, both in different versions of cults. And I'm just looking at this whole thing like, what the hell are these people doing? How irresponsible for these two adults to be in this situation, which was great because it forced me to grow up very quickly. And I was able to take responsibility for myself and my actions at a young age.
Did you see the answer to your question? There was a reason I went there. Do you see the answer to your question? It was like,
yeah,
pretty much from the moment that you were born, you were taking care of you. So
yes.
How would it be any other way if that's how you began your program? Because when our children are birthed, it's the parents that program the children.
Yeah.
And, don't do this, don't. It's just like with my grandbaby, when Ben and I are with her, we have a completely different child than when my 17-year-old is babysitting. You know what I mean? Because she has no patience. She's 17. She wants to be on the phone with her boyfriend. She's like, oh, mom put you to bed and you're out of bed because, grandma and grandpa are gone. And it's like, I came home and was like, Kennedy, the only reason you're getting that result with her is because the way you're presenting it, you're programming her to resolve, to react that. But with us, we communicate with her. We're grounded with her. We understand that, yes, she's 3, but she's intelligent and logical too. And if you explain it, they understand it. So what I notice is that when we come into this world, like for me, I had a crazy childhood. Just crazy town.
Yep.
But my mother, she didn't know how to be a mom. Although she raised all these siblings, by the time she divorced my dad, she got married at 16. So she was like, woo, I'm ready to go party and have some freedom because I've been raising kids since I was 6. And so that's a lot of that pattern. The other part, though, if we go deeper into past lives, is what kind of agreement and contract was made for them to be the representative energies. Right? Because we were talking about Callie, and I was telling my daughter, it doesn't matter if it's your sister or not. She's just holding that energy for that lesson. So what was that agreement that created the space for those two people to be the energies for you to raise? Right?
Right. Yeah.
What do you feel that is?
Well, it did, again, the benefits of that situation for me was at a young age, I was able to learn self-sovereignty, self-responsibility, not relying on them for my well-being. So that propelled me to go to Japan at the age of 19, to sort of learn a new language, to sort of just not be bound by the neediness of having, which, to have it, and there's advantages to having it, there's advantages to not having it. Clearly, not having it, if you yourself are not responsible, then that could lead to destructive tendencies, and which it actually did for me at a young age. I was very rebellious and got into trouble and did bad things. I was moving to Japan at the age of 19 that was sort of became my parent, the Japanese culture. And I learned a new culture, a new way of seeing the world, and a new language. And I had new friends that were sort of educating me and saying, you can't do that stuff. It's not, you can't, you can't be out of integrity. And I was like, well, everybody else in America is, sure, why not? They're like, no, we don't do that here. Sorry. If you're going to do that, you're going to have to go back home. Which was the lesson there for me was, because of my desire to be in Japan, I was ready to listen. I was ready to hear what others had to say and to learn, and then let go of some of the destructive tendencies. So yeah, it was, it's all divine. It's all divine.
Yeah. And that was kind of my point in asking that question, because a lot of times when Kerry was bringing up victimizing, and there are moments that we are definitely in a space of being a victim. Now, whether we stay in that space or not is the determinant factor of the victimization, right? Or one of the things I recognize, even with my childhood, with everybody's childhood, is that it's like you were fast-paced. You're a fast-paced grown. You were like, okay, I want a fast-paced grown because by the time I'm 19, I want to be in Japan, I want to learn martial arts, and I want to work with some people in martial arts. Like, it was like you, even your mom, when I went out to visit her, she was like, I'm going to Japan. That's my mission.
Yep.
And so it's like your parents, if you had any other parents than the ones you had with who you are, none of that would have happened. So it was this divine moment of, it sucks that you had to raise your parents. But at the same time, it was this beautiful blessing that taught you the street smarts that you needed to be able to go to Japan. And so I see today, the real part is, how do you set the boundary with your dad today? And is it worse or possible for him to understand that he's actually causing this girl more harm by avoiding his voice?
I try to tell him that every time I'm on the phone.
Then maybe it's a letting go process.
Yeah, I've told him let it go. Yeah. It's just letting it go, and and again keeping the healthy boundary. Because I don't, to having a phone call and everything, but I've told him up front. I said, I'd love for me to go out and visit him, but ultimately it'd be great for him to come out and visit us. And he just can't because he's not responsible with his finances. So I'm like, well, get responsible with your finances and come hang out. And so it's creating those boundaries of distance even. And like, hey, I can't even let you into my field, even if you're my dad, until you get responsible.
That's right. Having that boundary, no matter who they are. Yeah, because when we're on a path in our life, sometimes we have to let those we love go. It's just like that same way, if you love it, set it free. If it comes back, it's meant to be in your world.
Right.
Nothing is really ours, so I changed it. We're not even our own selves because we're constantly changing and evolving as well. How is this all coming up for you, Terry, just witnessing this journey that Reuben's on and all of that?
I've been thinking about discernment in relation to speaking. Like, even with the book, The Devil's Yoga, I definitely felt like it was worth speaking about it, but how? And so I changed all the names because I really felt like when I tuned in, that this wasn't about outing anybody. This was about really, how do I use my voice to help others that have had similar situations? So really even discerning where I'm speaking from and why am I speaking? Like really checking in. You said before, do I have an agenda? Is there an agenda or a purpose? No, I have a purpose to reach out. I'm going to be vulnerable enough to share that I was definitely taken for a really rough ride. And the purpose is to reach others that might have had a similar experience. And so it's that discernment on how do we even share our truth? And then also discernment within family. Like, I'm definitely the black sheep of the family. I have a family member that thinks I'm such a black sheep that she thinks I have autism. And so that's the factor that she needs from me because she can't make sense of me. So I must be neurotypical or non-typical, right? Something. Which is okay. But it's also this discernment of, do I really need to tell them about light language? No. I really don't, so how much do I share? How much do I not? Even just that discernment, I did an in-person gathering a few months ago, and there was someone there that was a little snake-like energy. So she had a really soft exterior, but behind that was this trying to work the room of it. And it was this discernment, do I call her out or not? And it was an absolute not. There are certain people you don't want to be calling out. You just want to separate from. We're all having to explain it. And there's certain people I want to dance with, and there's certain people I'll just dance next to. Right? So where's the discernment? I see you, I feel you, and I know what you're trying to do. And it's an absolute no. So how do I create that no, hold sacred space for the gathering that I'm running without that having to be interference? And I know if as soon as I would open a door a little bit to her, she would just bust right in with whatever her agenda was. But I had right. And so it's also, how do we speak? I wrote this article about the empath narcissist dynamic. And so much of that article was because it wasn't appropriate for me to speak my truth to the people in my life that I realized, because I had a pattern of this without even realizing it. I didn't realize until the last few years that even my college roommate probably had narcissistic personality disorder. And I was playing the empath role in that. And so even with certain people, it's really not good to call them out. But I had to speak. And so I could speak in a way that really articulated this, that was helpful to others. It was a way for me to get it off my chest without doing any harm. There was no harm done. And I've gotten feedback like this was really, really helpful. And that's great. This was supposed to be helpful, not to be outing someone. Just like my book is not about outing somebody, but how do we reach? And so there's been so much discernment as it relates to my own truth, my voice. How does it come out? When does it lead you? Yeah,
so you just opened a whole thing for me because, that was the whole thing with the relationships of my past, since I had been an empath and in a narcissistic relationship my entire life until my husband now. And I thought that I knew what love was because it was this trauma bonding kind of narcissist empathic relationship history. And then once I finally healed, and I have to say, it was you and your partner that really played a big role in that for me, because I was, I'll never forget, I was on the back of the truck and I had the bear hide because we had a bear come to us. We're making a drum. We're going to make a drum. And I'm sitting there scraping with your husband. And I looked at him and I'm like, I am searching for the mirror inside myself that is creating this experience externally. And I just cannot see it. And he looked at me and said, sometimes it's not a mirror. Sometimes it's a reflection of what we've already learned, and yet we haven't accepted that growth. And then we went inside and we sat down and, had that conversation. And when that clarity was brought to me, I was like, it was like a bomb blew up, because I really thought that the relationship I was in at the time, that I had not been in a narcissistic relationship. And it was like the quietest boom. It's like I was so worried. Like, no, I need to be accountable. There's something. And then I realized I was being over accountable, and there isn't such thing. And so, you putting that out there and communicating that, I think we even talked on the phone before you put that out. And it was like so powerful because it's a theme right now, and seeing this theme a lot in the communities of people waking up going, it's funny. I had an assignment for my students, and they're in the group, and every one of them was like, I might be a narcissist. Am I a narcissist? And I was like, the mere fact that you're even investigating that you might be a narcissist gets you off that list. But it doesn't mean that we don't have those tendencies. It doesn't mean that, we're not saying something and we really want it to work out a certain way. So say it in a way that we know might be softer for that person, and we might get the result we want. That's a definite manipulative communication that creates karmic feedback. Like Cassie not communicating to her sister, hey, my car is important to me. Her assuming, why would I have to say that to my sister? She should just know. And it's like some people don't have that same awareness. And once we assume it or we hold back or manipulate, then we get those kickbacks. So it's that whole narcissistic path space is really powerful because it's like this loaded weapon with layers and layers and layers and layers of other things.
Yeah. And just as a quick side tangent to this, there's a saying like, if you're pointing the finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Back.
Right. And so you need to work with that, like just because it's, as within, so without. It's not always clear cut, I think. For my experience in Latin America, I don't think I need to look inward for any kind of sexual predation energy. I don't think that's there. So sometimes when I'm looking outward, they're reflecting something very different. Where did I hand over my power? Where did I hand over my discernment? What wound was he able to hook me by?
Access.
Right? And so the finger out and the 3 fingers back are not necessarily equal in terms of the energy, because what might be coming towards us might be very different than what we are giving off. I don't have a sex addiction, not into pornography, right? So I don't need to look. It must be in me somewhere if I have an issue with him. Maybe not. So how do we use those kinds of reflection points that really get to our truth, where we're not on the scavenger hunt for something that's not there? There is something there for me for sure, anytime I'm pointing the finger out, but it might not be a mirror. And so I think it's really handy in terms of discerning, how do we even use those kinds of concepts in a way that bring about truth and real liberation, real freedom, and not more entrapment?
Especially in the magical community. Because once you start getting into the spiritual community, and we're talking about extra dimensionals, we're talking about channeling, we're talking about all these things, not only is it triggering the, religious aspects, which I have a lot of respect for. I'm a 10th generational pizza, and then I also walk the red road. There's so many different, so scratching the surface. I have a love for the consistency foundation for all belief systems, because all belief systems, they have the same foundations. They just put different faces on the stories, right? For me, that's my experience. And so when I'm looking at all those spaces, it's like, there's so much. If I'm having a hard time discerning my own relationships with people, how am I going to discern this big world? And then people start coming online and stuff saying, I'm the one, I'm the one, I'm the one, instead of saying, how are you? Is it okay if I take a look in your space? Do I have permission? And so that's one of the big little things. The worm and the eagle, that is a good discerning factor, because a lot of times we have shows and we have people on, and that's the lesson, is to see the false light. And a lot of times that is very challenging to witness or to recognize, because it's so well masked, and that person may feel in their soul that they're absolutely on that path. But how many times growing up in our life, and I've done this with all of my children, it's like, it might not make sense to you now, but when you turn 18, you're going to look back and be like, what was I thinking? Trust not even see it that way, Mom. And I'm like, well, that's why I said no. And that happens every time we're being burst into a new level of awareness in ourselves. Wasn't that true for you, Reuben? Like when you're doing your show and it's different things?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's definitely, I was really thinking about that what Kerry just brought up with the energy, I think it can be almost sometimes the opposite energy, cause and effect, which is, two sides of the same coin, victim, perpetrator, hero, the heroine or the villain. There's hero and villain, and then there's hero and heroine, and then there's villain and heroine. That's a trinity. So you can be on any one of those archetypal roles, and it's feeding the other one. It's either feeding the hero or it's feeding the perpetrator, or the villain. Yeah. So so I think sometimes not just the mirror of the energy, but just what energy is feeding the other energy. And in a sense, that's a mirror, and it can be a completely different energy, but it's still feeding the other energy.
That's right.
So I think, especially in the new age community, because it is under this guise of love and light and feel good stuff, and a lot of people do get a lot of feel good stuff from that world. So the idea that there's this dark stuff in there just goes over most people's heads, and I think that's the sensationalization, or the what's the word I'm looking for? The putting on a pedestal, or the making it seem better than it really is. We're always doing that with everything, all kinds of things, not just the spiritual world, but especially that world, because we have religions that we have a social construct around religions that, oh, they're not wrong. They're okay. They're tax free. That they're so good. They're beyond government. They're so good, so they get a free pass in our collective consciousness of how we perceive things. So therefore, over the years, that type of thinking has just been instilled into society. So we haven't scrutinized spiritual community and religions in the ways we probably should be with other aspects. Government is definitely being scrutinized now, but during the COVID time, everybody forgot how the government lies, cheats, and steals, and stabs everybody in the back, and does experiments on their own people, and they completely forgot all that. And they're like, I'm an experimental jab that's never been tested. Sign me up, and free fries. Yes, I'll take those too. So we have this. I love this this new term I've been using a lot. Dr. Drew actually turned me on to. I was listening to one of his podcasts. It's called Gell-Mann amnesia, and we often. The idea is like if you're an expert on a particular subject and you're reading the newspaper, and this article, whoever wrote this article, completely BS. Like, let's say you're, a lot about teas, the world of tea and different tea ceremonies and different things. And this article is just completely BS from start to finish. Like, the person doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. And that's wrong. You flip the page and then you read something about, let's say, science, so like brain surgery or something. And you're like, okay, yeah, that's real. Your skeptical mind, for whatever reason, because you're informed, knows about this. And then you just assume that the other side of the paper is correct when it's published by the same institution that's lying, and they're lying in your face. But somehow we put our critical thinking and our discernment, we put all that aside, and it's just, it's whatever the experts say about that subject, and I'm going to believe them. So we're constantly choosing our discernment based on the package it has, or based on the illusion that's being pushed in front of you. The experts say, trust the science, here it is. And then you're just, oh yeah, okay. But wait, the page before, you were totally lying to me. So that's part of I think a huge wake up for most of humanity right now, especially with all the funny business around the jabs and that whole, all the social constructs that came with that whole, psyop. And so humanity is getting schooled right now, big time. We all are. But I know we're talking spiritual community stuff, but this covers the whole gamut.
I think it's about everybody and all the different beliefs. I mean, one of the biggest things that I witness is that there is an aspect of our global community that is coming into a place where they're actually okay with the difference of opinion.
Yeah.
That is powerful because truly that's what's creating the massive amount of separateness. And it's not that we're not independent and separate and having our own belief system, but we need to be able to honor that independence. It's like, it's okay for us to be in alignment with different kinds of doctors and their viewpoints and medicine coming out with new things, but it's not okay for us to be in alignment with someone's spiritual belief system and new things coming out in that way. It's all investigation. We're learning on every level, and it is okay for us to not agree. It's so funny. I just got a total download on this. Bossy guides, they're coming in. So my husband and I were having an argument, and whenever I tell anyone in our family we had an argument, they laugh, right? Because Ben and I, neither of us are yellers. So like someone walking down the street would just think we're talking, and my boys were in the room and they noticed that we were having a disagreement. And so they started to walk out of the room, and I actually called them back in and had them witness our conversation. Because I was trying to show them and they watched the whole thing start to finish. And the important part was they were getting to witness a healthy communication where he valued my feelings and yet valued his own viewpoint and opinion, just as I valued his feelings and valued my own viewpoint and opinion. And we actually found a balance in those spaces without bending our own values, but while moving together. And it was so important because my boys are, 8 and 11, and my little guy just is large as his big brother and wants to be with him all the time. And so at the end of it, I was like, how do you guys feel? And they were like, wow, that was your argument? And I said, well, it wasn't an argument really, buddy. I had feelings, he had feelings, that we cared about each other too. And I think a lot of that is missed in our families, in our communities, in our businesses, in our belief systems, in our career sets, in our paths. It's like, guys, it is freaking okay to be different. We don't have to bend ourselves to make a community work, because it never will. We need to stay with what we believe in. It's like I was talking with you, Reuben, the other day, in The Matrix or any movie with a council, we could even do, I'm totally wrong, Green Lantern.
I didn't see that one.
My boys love anything that's of injured aspect.
Okay.
So,
actually, it's DC, but don't tell
anybody.
Is
it DC?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Marvel and DC universe, completely separate.
So I'm watching these movies, and they all have councils, right? And even in Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. So what happens in the council is, I used Matrix because it was pretty plain and clear, but half the people agreed on one thing. The other half of the people agreed on the other thing. And there was a guy in the middle that had a totally different opinion. They took a vote, made a choice on it, and all people that didn't agree with the choice, they still honored it, but with observation. They became the master observers because they were like, I don't know, man, I'm not feeling good about this. And that's what made that community so strong and powerful, and gave it the opportunity to shift if it needed to. Because although the collective was choosing this one path, the collective was still respecting those that were the observers. And this, I think, is key to what's happening in our world, and it is key to having discernment. And that couples right into reaching versus seeking. Someone's seeking, they come in this awareness, oh my gosh, I just don't want to be sick anymore. That's usually what does it. Someone is sick all the time who can't find help with Western medicine. So they start diving in, and then they can't have faith in it because they're so new to them. And they're like, man, this person's going to do psychic surgery. And for me, it makes perfect sense because everything's made of energy. So why the heck wouldn't you get rid of plastic surgery? And people are doing full body liposections with light therapy. And people will just hand over thousands of dollars to pay for that. But when you're like, hey, you got 5 minutes, I'll just do a quick thing of psych and surgery, click and sticker. You know, you're going to go into my space. Well, how do you look into that? And so when I witness those things happening, it's like, this is where the discernment is ran by fear. Anytime discernment is run by fear, whatever information a person's getting isn't clear because fear becomes the boss. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yep. Yeah. There was something I wanted to touch on. There was a bunch of different things. We hit a lot of different things on there.
I'm like, you should hear us on the phone alone.
I kind of forgot which one I was going to pull out of there, but in a sense, yeah, I think the fear, and that's where religion kicks in so much, is because it creates a sort of a fear, knee-jerk reaction fear. So everything you're discerning or you're thinking about is coming from a place of fear. Don't do this because it's bad. The devil will get you. Don't do that because this, aliens are evil. They're going to suck your blood. Other belief systems are bad. So you better watch out because they're going to sneak you. They're going to get you. They're going to pull you into their religion and then you're going to be sucked into the darkness. So there's all these narratives around the religious context and other, cults that sort of poo-poo other people's belief systems, and those control mechanisms create people from everything they do from a place of fear. So then what happens is their life force gets sucked. They're not happy. They're not doing what they enjoy. Everything is sick. You're sick. That's why all the, not all, but many of the nuns and priests of the world are just so damn depressing. Because they've given this idea that they can't enjoy themselves, and they've sacrificed everything, including their interest in life.
What do you think, Kerry?
Well, I think one of the places that I could see a lot of growth in me was as it relates to discernment is how I've oriented towards authority figures. Because even though I feel like I really have stepped into my power in many, many ways, I can see where there's such a deep conditioning to hand over truth to authority. And so even at this retreat center, we would have a ceremony, we would gather at the end, and the shamans up front would be the ones claiming truth. And so my first time there, I was like, oh yeah, they're so spot on, and look at that. And then the more I was figuring out what was really going on, I was like, oh my goodness, what they're saying is actually not even accurate to the person that they're processing their experience. Just one really bad example it's a good example of a bad situation, is that someone was actually seeing these really horrific sexual images in her ayahuasca journey. And so at the end, the shaman was like, oh, this is deep within your ancestral line. This is your wound. You need to keep coming back. Where in truth, it was the dark sexual energies in the ceremony that she was susceptible to. But when I was first there, I wasn't discerning that because I thought that they were the authorities. I thought they were trained shamans. I thought they knew what they were talking about. And so I can see where I'm wired to, oh, that person knows. And it's been something that's really important for me to, am I discerning the same situation? What would be my truth? What am I sensing into? And so it's because I was conditioned. I also grew up in a church. You just hand over authority to the priest, to the nun, to the teachers, to the parents. Anyone older than me pretty much was an authority figure. And so I think part of becoming an adult has been discerning that, and to really think, gosh, they're just a human being that's doing their best in this moment to discern what's happening in a situation, in a ceremony, whatever it might be. And so it's been a bit of a learning curve for me in terms of discernment. And I also can have an innocence about me that can trip up my discernment. Like, they wouldn't do honey harm. Like, these people, like, they're here for goodness, and so that innocence, I don't want to get rid of my innocence, but I also, in terms of discernment, have to say, am I operating from an innocent point of view, or am I really in my power and discerning as well, whatever might be, whatever is unfolding. But
yeah. How do you feel? Do you feel that there's any areas today, like you're looking at your life now and you see your experiences, do you feel like, wow, that experience from that retreat center, as horrific as it was and how challenging it was for me to even come out on the other side and reclaim my own identity and who I am and rebuild my identity, because I'm stripped so much and violated in so many ways. How much more do you feel you can see today and have that clarity before it's coming, rather than finding yourself in it going, oh, these walls are really red. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's been a great fine-tuning process, because even to be able to catch that woman who was in one of my in-person light language gatherings, that's one of the benefits. I see that energy so much faster and I can hold that boundary. And it's been strengthening for me in funny ways, where I was Zoom bombed. You know what Zoom bombing is? It's when you post your Zoom link, say on Facebook, you're having a free light language gathering. Here's the link, come join. Well, someone came who was well indoctrinated to believe that channelers are evil. And so she was typing, God pray for you. She spelled pray, P-R-E-Y, which for me is hysterical. And stop, shut up, like all of this. So I could see, we're all conditioned. We were talking about the conditioning that can come from religion. And some of that is, how do you view channels? How do you view light language? And so some people really get it and feel the light, and other people are so conditioned to think that that's the work of the devil. So anyway, I could feel my solidness. I was funny to me because I knew my truth so much. And it's funny because I'd already set sacred space. I was already channeling the light language. And when these messages were coming, so I was already in it didn't rock me, to have someone come at me with, oh, you're dark, you're evil, like repent, God pray for you, God pray on you, for that matter. So the funny benefits and that have come from this experience of straightening myself back up, and also I think owning my truth without shame, because this could really have been such a shameful experience if I went that route. I fell victim to sorcery, and here I am as an energy practitioner, right? And I was like, no, I'm learning. And how much more powerful can I be in discerning what other people are going through now that I just went through hell and got out the other side? And so there has been many benefits of needing to rebuild myself after that and coming out the other side a different person. And oddly enough, I'm grateful for the experience. I would do it again.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like battered women, they see the light on the other end of the tunnel, but they're so used to being in that constant pain. It could be anybody going through any kind of consistent pain or trauma in their daily life. And it's like, well, it's like this every day and I can deal with this. But what if I go into that light and see on the other side, it's not as light as I think it is? Or what if I fall from grace? And is that going to hurt more? Because this I can handle, I'm used to it. But being in a great space and falling from that, I don't think I can handle that. And that's a lot of the things that keep the people in that space, keep them in the abuse, keep them in the trauma. And honestly, I was a battered woman and I barely made it out with my life and a brand new baby and 2 teenage daughters. And it is amazing to me because I literally would not change any part of the journey I have been on in my life at all. Well, every single thing, even my own inner choices and mistakes and miscommunications or spinning feelings because I was going to change, it really prepared me for what I do now, for who I am now, for the people that I get to learn. Because that's my favorite thing, is to learn. And it did help me, and it does help me have more clarity in the information that comes in. For me, when I was growing up, I was born gifted. I was born a seer. And when I turned 16, there's certain ages as they're growing where you actually shift. Your body shifts for everybody, whatever that is. And when I turned 16, I went through such a shift and like an activation and awakening that it started to scare my mom. And she contacted all my blood relatives in Tennessee and Arizona. And they started sending all this stuff about witchcraft and the devil, and you're going to go to hell, and you can't have that gift. But then my grandpa preacher, he's adopted me. I have a lot of adopted family members. But he came to me and he said, Heather, every single church has a mystic. They just don't share it because they don't want people to get caught up with the falsities. They want people to see what's real. And it's hard to discern it when you don't know what you're doing. But I was still terrified. I was still like, oh my gosh, am I of God? Am I walking the path? I can't help it. I can see people's fears. I can see their thoughts. I can feel their feelings. And so that was a big reason why I didn't come out into the public sooner, because I was like terrified of those people messaging me saying you're going to go to hell. And it's like, no, that's your own fears. And I'm just bringing some light to your darkness, because that's what the law of love is, right? We resist evil not, but we expose it, yes, by exposing our own truths, not by running around pointing fingers at people, but by shining that light in ourselves, and that reflects it onto those people. And I freaking love that you felt empowered in that moment, because that was a big thing for me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be seen for who I am. They're going to just see their fears. And then I had to let that go and say, you know what? That is none of my business. What somebody else is feeling and seeing and doing is none of my freaking business, period, including my husband, including my children. Mm-hmm. And that was a hard thing for me to swallow. But once I let go of that attachment, I was literally watching my family flourish. Like, they started communicating better. They started growing because I wasn't meddling with my daughters. And I have 3 daughters from 17 to 25, and I absolutely will not get involved with their stuff. Nope. That is your stuff. I will hold space for you. So I think that's really super powerful. And it's happening a lot. Like, even when I'm watching other people's shows, you know, it's like having to discern the groups that are coming in and the questions and stuff, and allowing space for people to be in their fear. Yeah. Yeah.
You know who's a master of walking this path that I've been watching of late? And this is a shameless plug a little bit, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I've been watching most of his interviews with different newscasters and different groups that'll have him on, podcast mostly. Regular news won't have him on. But what a man of just pure integrity and speaking his truth and not judging others. He's very, he knows who the bad actors are, but he still will carefully introduce, you know, when he mentions them or if somebody else tries to throw them under the bus, he'll actually find he finds something nice to say about them. Mm-hmm. And to counter, for example, Biden, you know, but a lot of people are like, oh, that guy Biden. He's like, no, actually, you know, Biden's a friend of the family. We've known him for a long time. You know, I don't agree with his policies, but Biden, the man, he's a good guy. You know, he'll say something like that. And just the thing that he's stayed this course throughout this whole COVID thing, you know, calling out the vaccines from the get-go. And he's was ridiculed. You know, he was considered by the mainstream news one of the disinformation dozen, and websites were shut down. He was banned off of Twitter and Facebook and all of the social media, and he just stayed the course. He put out a book. It became the #1 bestseller about, you know, Fauci and the craziness. And now he's running for president, and he's just holding his ground because he's speaking his truth. He knows his truth because he's a lawyer and he knows all the science, you know, better than the scientists, because he's had to litigate the, you know, vaccines and other things, you know, toxins in the environment and these types of things. So he knows his facts, and he says, you know, and he's always open to, this is the other thing. Oh, this was what I wanted to bring up earlier. So he's always open to
come back.
We come back. He's always saying, if I'm wrong, correct me. If I'm wrong, I'd be happy to have a debate or a conversation about these things. Prove me wrong. And I'll, and I want to learn and listen if you have, and he does when you see him in interviews. Most people don't allow him to speak, and he's the one that's being there, being interviewed. But that's what I wanted to get to as far as the teachable aspect. So a little sidetrack, but that's my Robert Kennedy plug. Now we'll go to the other thing. Was I think those people like the snake lady that came into the room, you probably knew she wasn't teachable, so you didn't want to waste your time. Yeah. And Heather talks about this a lot. Are they teachable? So you can see in a person's eyes if they're willing to listen, or if they're curious about information that you might be willing to share or have. And if they have that glimmer in their eye, then those are the people that you have to sort of call out in a sense and say, hey, this is not cool. You shouldn't be doing this. The people that aren't teachable and don't have that glimmer and curiosity, you can just kind of say, don't waste your time. Yeah, don't waste your time.
And that's a beautiful point about, all these different people coming out saying, learn from me, learn from me, learn from me. The biggest thing I look at in a teacher, every one of my teachers, and they are elders. And my 3-year-old, she's like my master guru teacher, which I don't like using the word guru, but she is. She definitely is my master teacher for sure. But, I have these beautiful elder teachers. Every single one of them are teachable. Yeah. Every single one of them face themselves. They have a location, and they have 2 students and freaking family, best friend community in Gibraltar, which you guys will see them on in a couple weeks. They have a shop called Soul Seed Cafe, and it's one of my locations. And today I had my weekly session with them, and what they had said to me was, do you know why we have so much faith and continue this journey and are part of your community and we're such a family? And I was like, oh, why? I was open to hear. And they said, because you're so freaking teachable. You're so open. You're so willing to learn and expand, and you're vulnerable with us. You'll call us up and say, well, I learned this lesson this week, and that opens them up to learn their lessons. And I was like, that is a beautiful way to describe discerning a teacher. Are they teachable? Because what is a master teacher? It's really a master student. If your teacher can't learn through teaching, do you really want to learn from them?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think that's super important. Okay, guys, I really wanted to open up some questions that anybody may have.
We kind of covered a little bit. I'm still a little curious. Why am I continuously inviting this crazy father situation into my life? And I understand as a kid why I did that, but why is it still happening?
Do you remember in the car after we finished up the filming when you and I were talking, and I was sharing about how I wasn't fully... I was still me in integrity, but I wasn't fully showing all of myself because I didn't communicate with you how I felt about some things that were like some people and stuff, and I didn't feel safe to show that part of myself. And then you and I started talking about how in your own way, in my own way, we value others so much. But then when it has to do with our projects or the things we're doing, we'll sacrifice ourselves to not have a wave or to create a flow because we're not really emotionally bothered by it. There's no attachment. But at the same time, we're taking away our value.
Sure.
And so by not speaking that, we're basically blocking ourselves from that giving, receiving capacity because we're having it for everybody else, but we're not giving it to self. Remember that conversation? That's the same thing with your dad is what I see, at least. I mean, you're my dear friend. I love you so much. And we have a close relationship. So I've witnessed your conversations with your dad. And then that's what I consistently see is, it's like you will silence yourself. It's almost like you do the same thing your dad does with others with your dad because you silence this one part, but you have no problem telling him all the things that he needs to be doing. but you don't really sit and say, okay, hey, Dad, I love you. I've had this conversation with you. I want to talk about positive things with you. Let's redirect this. I mean, maybe not necessarily tell him you're going to redirect the conversation, but redirecting it into, oh, I'm sad that you're still going through that, or I hear that you're still going through that. How is the Size H2 project going?
Oh,
You know what
okay.
I mean? Like redirecting
I see.
it, because by doing that, you're now changing the energetic reaction to responses. Instead of you reacting to, oh, this is always the kind of relationship I'm having with my dad, you can now become more of an observer seat and have a response because you're redirected. Just like
I see.
many things. Does that make
Right.
sense? Because you're not valuing you in that way. And it's just a tiny grip. It's not like,
Right. So it's in the sense it's being the change. So if I start that catch ball and change the direction of it, then hopefully he'll start playing around with that as
and if he
opposed to
doesn't, set a boundary. Like
right.
when I am talking to somebody in my life that chooses a path. So like, I have a person in my life that chooses a certain path in their life that I don't agree with. They're my family. I love them. I don't agree with it. And when they're in that mindset, I usually won't call during that time of the day. But I still want to call and check in, but I am not going to participate. I set a boundary. And when I do get on that call, when those things are being brought up or I hear that type of conversation building, or like, oh gosh, okay, they've had some drinks. Then what I do is I actually redirect the conversation. I turn it into something funny, or I set a boundary and say, you know what? I love you so much. I'm going to call you in a day or two. I got to go. And I don't even communicate anymore with why I'm hanging up because there's no need. That person has chosen their life and I need to love, honor, and respect it. Do I agree with it? No. Am I going to go and sit and have wine with that person? Absolutely not, because I'm not going to support that pattern. So therefore, I'm not going to have that conversation either. And I had one conversation with that person saying, hey, when you're in this state, I'm not going to participate. But then all the conversations following, I will not go there. Good question, Kerry.
Well, for me, especially in like spiritual communities, like those kinds of spaces, it goes back to, can I be teachable, as you were talking about, and can I be in my knowing? And so if a shaman in front of the room is speaking their truth or how they're perceiving things, can I remain teachable that maybe I got it wrong, but be discerning about it? Not to hand over my power, but how does that resonate? Are there aspects of what they just said that's true? How is it landing in my body? And so I think there's that part of the balance is, first of all, putting myself into the equation, talking about balance. Right, where I think I've had really withdrawn myself from my authority and putting myself into the equation of discerning what's going on in the environment or what someone in authority is saying. And so I think first putting myself into the equation, but not in an arrogant, I know my kind of way, but in a, this is my knowing, and there might be things that I'm not seeing, and can I be teachable? And so it goes both ways for me in terms of being open to other realities that I'm not understanding, and being very teachable and yet remaining. So the balance is by putting myself into the equation and trusting myself, trusting my knowing, is part of that for me, at least.
And Reuben, same question.
Like you were just saying to me, Heather, that it's per situation, it's per person, it's per dynamic, it's per relationship. Everything is there's so many variables that there's not a cookie cutter answer, other than, taking those directions that Kerry was just saying, you have as many tools in your toolkit that you can have to apply to that situation, but how much of this sauce or that sauce or that, every situation is a meal, and there's all kinds of ingredients in there, and it's all being cooked in different ways. So you just have to, keep it from burning, or and turn the temperature down, or add more salt, or however it's going to be, because you don't know until you're done with it.
Yeah.
So
For me, the big thing is I always look into my own integrity. Because if I'm looking at the other people that are triggered maybe, or, having this other aspect or thing in their life that's altering their space. So for me, I have to look at is this an integrity for me? And I slow down. I don't always respond right away, because right away usually becomes a reaction. So when the situation occurs, I will take a look at myself and say, okay, what am I witnessing? What is triggering me? What memory is coming up from that trigger? Why is it triggering me? And I literally will pause. Sometimes I will not respond for a day or two when I'm having a communication, because I need to see what's in integrity with me. If I'm in integrity with it, I'm paying attention to how and what integrity is for me is, how am I impacting the others? How does this impact me? And how does it impact the people around me? Because I care and I love them. So if I'm aware of those things, then however I'm responding is going to be clean. It's going to be honorable. It's going to be in that space of integrity. So that way, however that person reacts or responds is not my business, because I did not manipulate the way I communicated to get a result. I did not hold back or misvalue my own understanding of self. And I honored their own viewpoint without disrespecting it, while also honoring my own. So that would be how I keep the balance. And are we perfect at it? We're our perfect versions of ourselves, which means it's always different. Because how do you feel about the conversations you're having?
Yep. So yeah, taking a pause is always, it's not really taught much in our society, in our American society. This is more of an Asian reactionary things. I noticed in Asia, there's a lot more, okay, we got it, we understand. And then you walk away, and then you really, before you reply, and then, or you're a little cryptic when you say something. Okay, that's a common practice in Asia, not so common in the Western world.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that's being learned right now is slow down. You don't have to respond right now. Really feel what you're feeling. How do you feel?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. For Kerry. Terry for Kerry.
Well, since I'm tearing up, I would absolutely yes. I think that, I worked with a real deal shaman after my experience. And one of the things that she asked me was, what did I miss? In terms of when you got the word that you could be an intern there, how did it feel in your body? Were there any kind of things that you overlooked? And I said, absolutely not. I was supposed to do this. If I muscle tested it, if I did a pendulum, I would have gotten a yes. And yes doesn't always mean sunshine and rainbows. Yes means there's a higher calling, and it might be actually really difficult. So I guess that could even be a side tangent on discerning and using pendulums and yeses and nos and stuff. But to get back to the question, I felt so vulnerable in publishing the book, and then afterwards, the amount of diversity that feedback I got in terms of something similar happened. It wasn't in plant medicine, but I had for example, I had a man contact me, and his woman got entangled with a yogi. No plant medicine, no altered substances, but basically she broke up with, she divorced the husband and went with the man, and all under a spell. And so the amount of phone calls that I've gotten and conversations that I've had with diverse experiences, some of which had nothing to do with plant medicine, but really had to do with being encaptured by somebody or some things, it blew me away. And the amount of people that could relate to the book was something I wasn't expecting at all. I thought I was going to be putting this thing out there that might be misunderstood greatly or laughed at or whatever it was. Like, but the amount of people that it's reached in their own way, and to have other people say, I've got you, I hear you, we have our unique experiences, but I'm here and I can care, and let me, talk to me, tell me your truth, and so I do feel like a big part of my journey down there was to come out the other side. I'm happy I survived it. And to be of service with it. It was definitely a soul calling to go through that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mario, one more question.
Oh, so many ways it could manifest karmic kickbacks. Basically, pick a pain and there you go. I mean, I think it depends on the situation, but I generally look at resistance in any sort in your life, however that shows up, as some adjustments need to be made, and again, no knee-jerk reactions, because sometimes knee-jerk reactions we're trying to make it worse because we're trying to fix the wrong problem, so that's where sometimes you got to sit in the pain for a little bit to figure it out, what's going on here, and not have an immediate way to fix it. Maybe that's not the clearest path. And sometimes that's where get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And for me, breath work has been key to that, with the Wim Hof method, going into the cold showers, and relaxing into that. And it's in that dark space is where you actually can get the clarity, the cleanest path to take becomes the loudest, is when you're sitting in those dark spaces. And you have to go sit in those dark spaces in order to get the message.
Yeah, you got to be in the mystery. It isn't, if we're all sitting in light, and we aren't bringing the light into the darkness of a mystery, or finding our light by facing that person ourselves, then how do we know what the light is? There's nothing there to discern it. That's all we're seeing. And that's what's happened in a lot of things that happened in the spiritual community, in these small communities that we started with. And now 20 years later, it's this ginormous community with all these people wanting information. And they need to realize it is not just about, I just want to learn the fun stuff. I just want to go into this. It's like, no, you need to face your inner trauma. You need to face yourself. You need to go into those spaces if you really want to be able to access the magic in you. Because that is how we actually move through these spaces of consciousness. And I think that karmic entanglement can be a sneaky thing that even those of us that have been doing this our whole lives will be like, oh my freaking gosh, I got karmic entanglement. Dang it, And then having to figure out and using those tools that Kerry and Reuben were talking about, and understanding how. That's the thing. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. It's not what we do, it's how we do it. And is what we're saying matching what we're doing? One of the things that we'll be doing on the show is, those of you that have signed up for Get Tailored, you'll come on and it'll always be different. Everybody's different. Everybody has different needs. So sometimes it'll be simply a question, something you're facing in your life. Other times it'll be, me just tuning in and taking a look in your space. I've never met you, don't know you. And then go from there. And, Reuben and I will give, and whoever's on the show that week will give the perspective that comes through. And it can be anything. Absolutely anything. Spiritual, business, emotional, relationships, all the elements, how you're impacting the external world. Or maybe, hey, Heather, I'm fully in this career. I'm not loving this career, but I've been doing it so long. How do I take the tools that I've learned from this career and actually apply it to something I love? And by the way, I don't know what I love. How do I find that? So, it literally can be anything. So tune in. and ask questions. And I'm super excited because getting tailored and form fitting yourself to your soul, as we've talked about today, I'm going to learn from you guys too. And I'm so grateful and excited.
Awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Thanks.
thank you guys so much. And thank you, Kerry.
Thank you.
I know
for having
Reuben's
me.
excited. Oh my gosh, you're
Yep.
awesome. I love you so
Likewise.
much.
And just, it's such an honor to come on in your first show. I was like, feel like a little kid. So,
Yeah.
I know, we are all little kids.
We'll see how it all comes together.
Yeah.
Cool. I got to
All right.
run to a gathering. Thank you guys.
I love you guys.
All right.
I will talk
Love
to
you
you
very
later.
much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the Thunderdome.